The following program does not necessarily represent the views and opinions of Reality Radio 101, its advertisers and sponsors, or its listening audience. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to the Bear Psychology Radio Show with psychologist, author, and speaker, Dr. Anna Baranowsky, where mind, mood, and what matters to you are discussed. We're broadcasting live from Toronto, Ontario, Canada, on Reality Radio 101. Our email address is instudio101@gmail.com. And now, your host of the Bear Psychology Radio Show, Dr. Anna Baranowsky.
Hi, everyone. I'm so glad to be back with you again today. And we have a really excellent show for you. We are bearing witness to mood, mind, and health. And I am Dr. Anna Baranowsky. Today's conversation is one I've been looking forward to. And we are going to dive into a very complex and often misunderstood world of relationships for people who either have relationships with somebody with borderline personality disorder, or maybe they struggle themselves with borderline personality disorder. Or, you know what? I looked at the book, and for me, it just seems like a relationship book with people who sometimes struggle or get things wrong, or maybe, you have moments where, old messages come through and you just make relationship mistakes. And I think that's really, really common. Probably everybody I know has made mistakes in relationships. I certainly have. Have you? If you've ever loved someone with BPD, or you live with someone, or you have somebody in your life, or you yourself struggle with relationship issues that can feel electric and fragile at times, and deeply connected, but then suddenly catastrophic. Our guest today has dedicated his career to bringing clarity, structure, and hope into that emotional terrain. And I'm pleased to welcome Dr. Daniel J. Fox, a licensed psychologist, internationally recognized BPD specialist, and author of the Relationship Workbook for BPD, a guide to managing intense emotions and building better relationships. And it's an interesting piece of work because it balances two very essential truths: compassion and accountability. And I'm reading through the book, so I can see it doesn't really use shame as a tool, doesn't minimize what's going on, doesn't excuse harm, but it provides really practical tools and a lot of reflection exercises, which I really like because, when we spend a little time reflecting on ourselves, we stop the inner kind of certainty that our version of the truth is the only way. So we're going to explore BPD, look at triggers, figure out what repair looks like, and I'm really happy to have you join us today, Dr. Daniel Fox. Thank you.
You're right. I'm so excited. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Fantastic. So before I start, I just want to say I really enjoyed the kind of the way you structured the book. I know you're working with New Harbinger, and they really, really value the way these workbooks are made. I'm actually just finishing a book myself with New Harbinger, and I'm really impressed with how much they care about the voice in the books that they write. And that really came through. Your book offers a really nice roadmap for people who are struggling in their relationships and get caught in cycles where their relationships fail or they don't know how to repair their their connections with the people that are most important to them. I wonder if we can start with how you got to a place where borderline personality disorder was what you wanted to focus on. And that is a really good starting place. So maybe we can start with that. How'd you start getting interested in this area?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, well, it started a little bit in my undergrad. So I worked in a lab that studied psychopathy, and they were looking at, personality components and underlying components as to what was driving psychopathy. And in that, I kind of brought that and sort of broadened it out to personality overall. And then as I started doing more research and going through my master's program and then my doctoral program, and I found that there was this disorder that everyone seemed to have this intensive visceral reaction to, whether they saw them or not. And it was interesting. So then I started working in a prison, a female prison first in Tallahassee, and then the same type of stigma kept coming up. Yet even other clinicians or medical professionals hadn't really worked with these individuals, and I was just very confused. I'm like, so you're treating the stigma, you're not treating the individual. And that just, as I learned more about it, as I learned that this is, I mean, one of the most successfully treated disorders. It has been called the most successfully treated mental illness. And I think that people lose that scope, and they lose that. So then I just continued on it, working with individuals incarcerated or in private practice or in universities or in hospitals, in a wide variety of different ages. And the more I work with it, just the more I enjoy the challenge and the depth, and just how much I admire people that are contending with a lot of these beliefs, behaviors, and patterns.
Oh, wow, that's that's really impressive because as you said, you used the phrase intensive visceral reaction, and I think you were talking specifically to practitioners or people who help people and then find it very difficult to work with the population of borderline personality disorder. And you said, and I'm not sure if I heard you correctly, so maybe you could just tell me if this is right. You said BPD is the most successfully treated mental illness. Is that what I heard you say? And can you tell me why you think it is the most successfully treated mental illness?
Research to support that, Zamani's research has supported it. So there's a number of modalities that we
Hmm.
can utilize, as psychologists or mental health professionals, that can really help these individuals. Of course, DBT is that platinum standard, but
Hmm.
then once DBT was found to be efficacious, then people are like, well, are there other strategies? So even CBT can be adjusted to be efficacious with BPD, and then you have transference focused. For me, I'm object relations interpersonal, but also we're all eclectic, I think. But so there's all of these different facets, and I think that there's so many inroads, and it's great that the research actually supports this. And this research isn't anything new; it's like 20 years old. And I'm constantly working with my doctoral students, and we're training, and they come in with that. Dr. Anna, you're not going to believe it, but they come in with this stigmatized belief. And then, of course, my follow-up question is always, well, have you worked with an individual with BPD? And they're like, well, no, but that's what I've heard. And
Right.
and of course, you don't shame, fault. That's all a waste of time. I don't do that. But instead we're like, okay, so here, let's try getting some experience. And they're like, it's nothing like, over time as they're working with these individuals, that they're like, nothing like I thought it was going to be. And then of course, then we do the compare and contrast. And it's been my ongoing experience in working with these individuals that they are dedicated to change, and it's all on a spectrum, right? So that dedication tends to vary, but that they do want to do things differently, and they don't want to destroy their relationships. They don't want to destroy their families and all this, and they don't have, all of this malicious intent that people keep ascribing to them. So, but to go back to your original question, yeah, that it is supported by research. It's just not put out there enough. So I appreciate the platform.
Yeah, and there is a stigma that goes along with it, and you are right. But I think one of the other things that happens is there isn't necessarily sufficient and adequate training to work with personality disorders in general and BPD specifically, because, I think it's true that Dr. Linehan's work, dialectical behavior therapy, is one of the most well-known approaches. But even with DBT, the outcome, the efficacy is still, not extremely high. And I think it's really important, as you said, to have a multimodal approach. And even if you have DBT, in many cases with the clients that I've worked with borderline personality disorder and personality disorders in general, and certainly with the incarcerated population, you have a very high personality disorder. You have a very significant trauma. And so you may know how to do this kind of relationship work, but if you can't do the trauma work, then we have this kind of return to the same strategies for survival. And a lot of the BPD strategies are survival strategies. As you know, I'm reading through your book, and it really becomes apparent that you can see that as well, which is really, really nice the way you framed that. In your introduction, you write, if you've picked up this book because you want to learn how to turn down the volume of self-shame and hate, how to bolster healthy relationships, and how to see your life with that important person in a hopeful way, I just thought that that was a fantastic way to frame what you wanted to accomplish in your book. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you want to accomplish here with the reader?
Yeah, and that's a great question, because the goal of the book was that I wanted to put something out there that really tapped into many of the central issues of my clients, whether I'm currently working with them or having working with them in the past. And the relationship seems to be just this common platform or aspect that they were constantly bumping up against. That was the, pardon me, that was the added stressor. That was the added complexity, whether it was familial, it was romantic, it was friendship, it was work, but the relationship component. And if we go back to John Gunderson's work, who's considered the father of BPD, that he, in his later writings had stated that he wondered if BPD is really a relationship disorder. And that always stuck with me, because I'm like, that's so true. I have a lot of clients that when they're outside of a relationship, that they're doing okay. They don't have BPD activations. Self-harm urges are exceptionally lower. Promiscuity is exceptionally lower. You have all of these abandonment fears, rejection sensitivity, emptiness. All of these factors are significantly lower. Then get them into a relationship, and then you add the favorite person component, and then you get all these activations, and it's almost as if they get on this carousel. And all of us, for those of us who've been on a carousel, we get on the carousel, we believe that it's going to stop. Like the carousel is going to, but imagine if the carousel, nope, you're already on it, too bad. Now we're just going to keep going. And then you have no idea when it ends. And that's just a small example, I think, of what it's like for somebody with BPD. I'm on this carousel. I don't know what to do, and I'm just spinning and spinning and spinning, and I'm trying to make decisions. And if we can turn down the volume, build insight, we know as providers, Dr. Anna, we know that insight is a stage of therapy, not a goal. So then with insight, then we want to get behavioral change, but you got to have the tools. And trauma, absolutely, but also other aspects, attachment aspects, and then interpersonal aspects, and self-confidence, and agency, and ability. All of these factors come in. And so in writing that, that small section of the book, it was just to sort of illuminate that we're not going to be about shame. We're not going to be about making you feel bad for your choices or your perspective, but instead, let's empower you in order to see, learn, and do things differently so you can be more impactful in a different and healthy way in your relationship.
Yeah, it's a really useful approach because I think that people want that agency. They want to be able to think about where they are struggling. And you make that really clear in the book. You give really good kind of questionnaires for people to identify what are the areas that they may be struggling. And I want to get there in just a minute. If people are interested and you want to be part of the conversation, to email us at instudio101@gmail.com, and that all of your comments and your questions are valued very much by us, and it's a great way to open up the conversation. So please do let us know if you have a question or you want to share. In your book, you identify 10 BPD relationship problems. And then you do this incredible outline of questions to more precisely pinpoint where people are struggling so that they can understand, this is something that's really not working for me. So I can more closely focus on where I'm really having difficulty. And then you can like focus more deeply on the areas you need to work on. Can you tell us a little bit about those 10 areas and how you found them and what you do with them?
Aspects that I've seen often in my clients. Not only there's some similarities that are sort of classic, and I got my air quotes going. I don't know if you can see them, Dr. Ann, but they're
Yeah.
there, right there, air quotes. But that are related to some of the symptoms and traits that are often seen in individuals with BPD: chaotic relationships, abandonment fears, rejection sensitivity, emptiness, and these various factors. And in those 10 areas, they're from research. They're also from my own clinical experience with various clients that were at various stages throughout their relationships as well, and pulling those together. And a lot of the analogy that I use with my clients is it's like eating a burger, right? And that burger, right? We can't eat it all in one shot. We can't take all of it. So let's say it took 10 bites to get through the whole burger. So a lot of times what an individual may do is see these 10 and be like, okay, I'm going to take on all 10. I'm going to do all 10. You can't shove the whole burger in your mouth. You gotta take bites, which is why we talk about the top three, right, that are most impactful, and
Mhm.
focusing on those top three because you want to make it small bites. You don't want to choke on it. You want to have those small bites, the little burger bites. Not only can you then enjoy the burger, hence, right, enjoy the relationship, hopefully more, but also you're able to digest it better. And I think that's such a great analogy for what so many of my clients are trying to do, and what a big point or focus of my goal in this workbook was: how can I help you identify these top three and then help you work through it, identification, moving forward, and just keeping focused on these top three areas. And then should you choose to, then you can go back and you can hit another three if you want or whatever. So there's a lot of different approaches, just as everybody eats their burger differently.
So I'm going to read these out because I thought they were just great and very, very helpful as a reader. So I'm actually going to just ask the listeners to kind of think, if you're having trouble in your own relationships and you listen to these 10 relationship struggles, what are the ones that really stand out for you? Fear of abandonment, overreaction to perceived slights, unpredictable mood swings, excessive clinginess and neediness, sudden withdrawal or neediness, extreme jealousy and control issues, testing the relationship, frequent breakups and makeups, difficulty handling criticism, and difficulty trusting positive experiences. And I have a question for you about that. Um, what are the ones that you find are that you see come up to the surface most frequently?
Personally, I think abandonment manifests so differently for different individuals. So I think abandonment is certainly one. Jealousy can be one, and a lot of retroactive jealousy is certainly very common. And that last point is, can you trust the good times? And I see that in a lot of the folks that I've worked with, and perhaps you have as well, throughout, throughout my career, is that when things are going well, it's almost, you wait for that other shoe to drop. Well, what's interesting about BPD is that other shoe is so scary because it's so uncertain. And if we go to Lorna Smith Benjamin's work, who is a psychologist who I deeply, deeply admire, and she says that growing up in chaos, because she has some developmental components of the spectrum or trajectory to develop BPD, that early on that there's comfort in chaos. And we see that in our adult clients or clients that we work with, that there's this comfort in chaos. And there's also confusion in chaos, as chaos can equal passion. And of course, we have to dissect that with your clients, so on and so forth. But that also, when all's quiet, then all that really means, and this is as if BPD was in their mind and speaking to them, well, that just means you don't know the pain that's coming. So if you create it, and I've had so many of my clients say this, they say, well, if it's on fire, at least I know it's on fire. And I don't have to sit there and say, when is my house going to burn down? So instead, and this of course, isn't said as directly, but if I burn my house down, at least I know that it's on fire and burning down, instead of waiting for someone else to do it.
Oh dear.
Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds really, really exhausting. And I think kind of learning about that, the difference between what is something I've experienced before, and so I'm familiar with it, versus what would really create for me a sense of well-being and contentment. It's a little refinement of the detail. The other thing that I was wondering about is how so many of these items on that list of 10 seem to connect with the idea of unmet expectations. Like we tell ourselves how things should be, and then when they are not that way, then I think, oh my God, my friend just like blew me off because, I thought, since we went out last Saturday, maybe we were going to go out this Saturday, but that was never part of the picture ever. It's like this unmet expectation that worms its way right into the heart of the kind of pain that a person can feel.
So you're hitting on central component, which is expectations.
Yeah.
Expectations that get amplified by what Lorna Smith Benjamin calls, and I've kind of taken that same term, which is that family in the head. And that family in the head, this is a chorus, not always family members, but they're the chorus in our brains, and we all have it. The thing with people with personality disorders, they tend to be more maladaptive, and they're encouraging of more maladaptive beliefs, behaviors, and patterns. So in that instance, that expectation that, well, Tony, whoever Tony is, so Tony is gonna text me back, so I'm gonna send a text, and then Tony doesn't text back. Texting it vexes me so. It's so complicated, but for so many. So, but you send a text. Our initial expectation of probably 99% of all people who text is an immediate response, but you don't get it. So then our expectation isn't met then our family in the head, let's say in this case attached to BPD, is saying, see, he's probably out with somebody else, or he probably doesn't like you anyway, or if it's a boss, I mean, we can attach it to any kind of relationship dynamic, but if we stay with romantic, well, he's probably cheating on you, or he probably doesn't love you anyway, or and all of these internal speech that just continues to play on and on and on, that they hear that, and that becomes an amplification of BPD. So then what happens? The individual responds to that by texting, right? Calling, texting, and then they're just blowing that other person up. And maybe what's happened, maybe they're at work and they had to turn their phone off because they're in a job interview or a meeting, or some people, and it happens, some people forget to plug their phone in and their phone dies, and that just starts the carousel for the client, for the individual.
Yeah. Well put. Yes, absolutely. I'm going to start going to our emails because, as you were saying, communication can sometimes blow up, and that is exactly what is happening here. So
Okay.
we are going to take some of the questions and comments from our listeners, and thank you very much for tuning in and joining us and adding to the show. I love it when our listeners reach out to us and ask questions. It just makes the show richer. So, this is from Irene. Thank you, Irene, for your email. Good afternoon. I heard of these 3 C's of BPD. Can you please touch base as to what they are? Thank you very much. And I'm just going to kind of sidebar this. So Irene, I believe, is talking about the 3 C's for BPD, which is I didn't cause it, I can't control it, and I can't cure it. Can you help us with that, Dr. Fox?
Cure, control, and cure. Okay. So that didn't cause it, right? So we can address each individually so that the individual didn't cause it. Really, what personality disorders are is they are very eloquent, and eloquent doesn't mean like fancy and great. Eloquent just means really complex. So individuals developed these patterns of survival. They were early in their life. They had to survive that environment, whatever it was. And not 100% of all individuals who develop BPD have experienced trauma. A lot of individuals have. I believe the percentage is around 88 to 92, depending on what research you're looking at, which is exceptionally high. And so if we're looking at cause, so it becomes that survival strategy. Well, a lot of the things that we did, right, whether we have BPD or not, we developed patterns as little kids, but then we start to shed them in our teens. Well, what happens with maladaptive beliefs, behaviors, and patterns that later become part of BPD is the individual doesn't shed it. So you hold on to it, you continue to do it, and understandably so, because if they were once helpful, then shouldn't they always be helpful? And I like to use the stock market example, that in the 80s, there were stocks that were really high and everybody was throwing money into it like, oh, this is going to last forever. But it doesn't. And the stock eventually goes down and maybe it goes to zero, or maybe it goes to like JCPenney is a great example, not deriding JCPenney, but their stock used to be very high and then it went very, very low, right, into the pennies. And it's imagine, even though it keeps going down, you keep putting money into it. You keep investing into it because your belief is that it's going to pay off. It's going to keep me safe, but it doesn't. And impaired insight is the universal, right, symptom of all personality disorders. Every personality disorder has impaired insight to varying degrees. So then if we talk about control is really about safety. So underneath control is safety. So the reason why I want to control everything is so that I can have a sense of safety. So with BPD, even though it's paradoxical, which is that, well, I'm going to control what you do, who you see, and where you go. And it's not rational. They don't think that way. Most individuals with BPD don't think that rationally, or any of us do, that I'm going to control everything you do so I feel safe. They don't think that because it becomes almost like this old pattern that's how they function within the relationship. So who are you with? What are you doing? Where were you? Everything has to make sense. Life doesn't always make sense. We know that. So then that sense of control, but the greater control you put, the higher the probability of resistance within the relationship. And then lastly, cure. There is no cure for personality disorders. There just isn't. But there isn't for the flu, there isn't for cold. There's a whole host of other things. But I think with personality disorders or mental health overall, is that people have the idea that, well, there must be a cure for it, but there isn't. But what there is for BPD is management and control strategies. I've worked with people that were florid on every criteria in the DSM, all 9 criteria, florid, meaning like 10 out of 10. Then we work together, right? Building skills, adaptability skills, presentation, insight, core content, service content, all this stuff. And if you spoke to her now, you wouldn't know that she had BPD unless she told you. And she may or she may not. I don't know. Depends on the conversation you have with her. But you wouldn't know.
And I think that's really a hopeful thing, because we can figure out how to lean towards the places that are injured within inside of ourselves. It doesn't mean that the injury will completely go away. I mean, we'll still have scar tissue, but we can work around the scar tissue to come up with a way that adapts to human relations and the world around us. So we develop a different relationship with our own inner languaging that is, hardwired. Here's another question. We've got a lot of emails. So I think that says a lot about what you're bringing and how important this topic is. So I'm so grateful you're with us today. I think this is a perfect conversation. This is from Charlie, who says, how do we know if a personality disorder is borderline? Well, maybe we can just edit that just a wee bit and just first talk about what borderline personality disorder actually is, what we can expect, and then move in a little bit more precisely with how do we know if a personality is borderline.
Borderline personality disorder. So there's a variety of specific criteria in the DSM-5, right, which is what we use here, and I believe it's also used in Canada as well.
Yes.
And in different parts of the world as well. And so in those 9 criteria, what we're looking at unstable relationship, self-harm or suicidal threats. We're looking at possible dissociation, possible paranoia. So there's a host of criteria, without going through all of it, because I think that the criteria, a lot of people can now look it up online. When I started training, there was no online, so people couldn't do that. So what I think is really advantageous is, what are the differentiators? What are the sniffers, right? When I'm training mental health providers, or I'm working with my doctoral students, I always tell them, I want to build your sniffer. And your sniffer in this case is that for BPD, we're looking for abandonment, rejection sensitivity, and emptiness. Those are the 3 distinguishing factors for BPD as they relate to any other disorder. Now, of course, they're going to vary based on the individual. And an individual may have other core content areas. That's sort of what I call these inner factors that drive these maladaptive beliefs, behaviors, and patterns, which are a lot of relationship issues, which could be self-harm behaviors, other promiscuity, alcohol issues, things like that. So this core content, people have their individuals, but for BPD, there's that classic 3, and all 3 don't have to be there, but they're often there to varying degrees. And that's what we're looking for, like that sense of abandonment. What behaviors follow that fear of abandonment? What behaviors or beliefs, whatnot, are followed by that rejection sensitivity, or that feeling of emptiness? And emptiness isn't depression. And that's also very, very confusing. We can talk about that if you want. But those 3 factors. So there we go, 3 factors. So when someone asks, what is BPD and do I have it? That's not always an easy question to answer. But often what I start doing is start sniffing around for, are there abandonment issues? And if so, how did they come up? Is there rejection? Is there emptiness? And how does it come up? And how are these manifesting? And what are those relationships like? And relationships aren't just interpersonal, they're intrapersonal as well. So we're also trying to figure that out, how you see yourself, how you relate to yourself. And if you have sort of this sense of self-contempt, which is something I work with a lot of my clients, they hold this idea of this self-contempt that they've internalized, possibly from an abuser early in their life or from others, but it becomes this sense of that I'm this just intrinsically bad person. You know, I mean, I was in prison for 21 years, right? That's what I tell people. I worked in prisons, right, for 21 years. And I've met genuine psychopaths, and that's it. Those are the only individuals that I really believe that do have this center of contempt for self and others.
Mhm.
The rest of us, the rest of the world that wouldn't qualify for psychopathy, and most of us wouldn't, we have a good true self. Like we do. Like so many of my clients and people that I've worked with are so kind and
Mhm.
and just caring, and they are strong, like so strong. The two women that I spoke to this morning prior to us meeting, I mean, just incredibly strong human beings. I mean, professionals, business owners, managing relationships, managing everything that goes with it, but also managing these poor content activations and these drives to maladaptive behaviors. I mean, that's really hard. But I'm telling you, they're in it. Work with me is hard. I know it is, and not because I'm mean. I tend to think I'm a delight. But hey, you never know. But it's really just like I have so much admiration for the people who work with me because it is hard. But boy, I'll
Mhm.
tell you, whew, they've got guts and strength. You know, ability and agency is what so many of my clients have in droves. So I
That's such a beautiful way of framing it because and I think it's true when you have skill at something, then you can see the hard work that the clients are putting in. And I really appreciate how you framed that. It's it really shows how you meet your patients with a lot of respect and dignity. And that's really, really needed, when we do the hard clinical work that is often needed when we're really suffering. I'm going to move us into some more because I'm telling you, there's so many emails. I don't think I'm going to get through them all today. Um, but I really want to just remind people if they're interested in the book, it's the Relationships Workbook for BPD, Skills to Help You Cultivate Emotional Safety, Deep Understanding, and Build Stronger Connections. And the subtitle is a safe space for people with borderline personality disorder to unlearn destructive patterns, overcome fear of abandonment, create and sustain close relationships. And we're speaking with Dr. Daniel Fox today. And this is so interesting. So, hello today. This is from Beth, who says, I just love Dr. Fox's quote on his website, knowledge is empowerment. Can you touch on that?
when when my clients first come to me, the, this idea of this stigma that they're not going to be able to get over it, and there's such a skew of information out there. So when they come to me, a lot of times there tends to be a paucity or a lack of genuine information. And I've always approached BPD is that individuals who have it should have hope. Like you should have hope. This is a treatable, manageable disorder. Is there a cure for it? No. Is there a cure for the cold, the flu? I mean, we won't go into all this stuff because I mentioned it already. But yeah, I mean, there isn't, right? But you can manage it. You can, instead of it managing you, and building that knowledge. When they have that knowledge, they build that insight, then using it for behavioral change, for interaction process, for relationship encouragement, for intimacy, and not just sexual intimacy, but also just friendship intimacy, work intimacy, being open and confident about who you are. That is, right? Knowledge is, right? Empowerment. Having that knowledge and knowing how to do it. So many people with BPD and other clients who come to me, they're like, I don't know how to do that. And it's like, well, I'm glad we're working together because we're going to figure it out. And then we dive in there and we do it. And so that's where that comes from.
Yeah, getting the right skill set and just being aware that there are people out there who could make a difference and, get the right tools because, sometimes that's all it takes. And of course, hard work because
Mm.
this is not a cakewalk. I mean, you're going to work really hard if you're going to deal with this. The same thing with trauma work. It's like it can be really deep and hard work, and yet you get to the other end and you start to realize you have more energy. Some of the things that would evoke so much fear and trouble start to lighten. You can face yourself with some compassion. Like I think there's a lot of parallels in this work. So thank you. This is from Evan, who is asking, does it affect men more than women or vice versa? Thank you, Evan.
Great question. Um, So there's a long-term belief that females were more likely, 75% is the old statistic, that were likely to have BPD compared to males, which is 25%. But
Mhm.
when they went back, and this is like research that was done like 10, 15 years ago, maybe more now, but they went back and looked at those old studies and took out the confounds, normalized the statistics. And what they found actually tends to be much more realistic to my clinical experience, and perhaps yours, Dr. Ann, as well, which is that you have 52% female, 48% male. And that seems more accurate. The problem is the misdiagnosis. And I can't remember the author, but I love the book Noise, and it talks about like uh, medical diagnoses and how they change by different providers. And that's called noise. And if we look at the noise, so here what happens is if you have a male, let's say, who is exhibiting BPD, right? Patterns, behavioral patterns, they are at a significantly higher likelihood to get a diagnosis of antisocial personality disorder. If you get a woman, a female, who is exhibiting antisocial personality patterns and behaviors, they are more likely to be misdiagnosed with borderline personality disorder. And that adds to the confusion. And it's part of the stigma, it's part of the misunderstanding. So I think that more clinicians, and I think that this is a great resource in order to put this information out there, as I try to do as much as possible, whether I'm training clinicians or speaking with individuals or family members who with BPD or experience BPD, is that we need to have clarity in information as it relates to this very confusing and complex disorder. And Dr. Gunderson, again, father of BPD, I mean, he even said this is the most complex mental illness on the planet. I tend to think he's right.
Mm-hmm. And it affects so many people, even if it is not diagnosable. And I want to just remind our listeners that sometimes you might have one or two symptoms that are really problematic for you. You're not going to get a diagnosis, but you may have some features that you recognize you need to attend to in order for you to kind of live this life as well and with as much dignity as possible. And now I'm going to jump right into the next question because it fits really well. This one is from Jody, and she says she's enjoying the show from New York City. Well, welcome, Jody. Thank you for listening. I have very low self-esteem. Jody says, how are ways that I can build my confidence and what causes this?
Self-esteem. So if we're talking about self-esteem, self-esteem is so fascinating because for so long, our profession, right? Now this is my opinion, Dr. Ann. I'm gonna put it out there. Here we go. But I think that our profession worked with self-esteem incorrectly. And I have an old mentor many years ago, and he says we all do self-esteem wrong. And I remember being like, what? And he was right. So because what we do is when we're talking working on self-esteem, what we do is we work on our deficits. We over focus on our areas of low self-esteem. So then if we focus on actually our self-esteem strengths, right? What's cool about Jody? What can Jody do? How can, where does Jody feel successful? tapping into those things and using metrics. I use metrics with all my clients, and it's so important. We can't just say, like, well, what do you want out of therapy? Well, I want better self-esteem, for example, right? If I was working, and I don't know Jody, but right, if I was working with Jody and she was like, well, I want to improve my self-esteem, I said, okay, all right, Jody, here's what we're gonna do. All right, what are your metrics for self-esteem, whether low or high? But we're gonna amplify those positives. We're going to focus on them. And that doesn't mean we're going to completely ignore the negatives, because here is what the research shows, right? Put it into Claude or wherever, any AI, whatever, or you can just Google Scholar. You can look it in there and you'll see focusing on the positives for self-esteem builds strengths. When we focus on the negatives, we have stronger strengths. That doesn't mean that we're amplifying the negative self-esteem aspects. What it means is that we are spending so much time and just, uncovering negative self-esteem work. We're completely negating the positive that can actually lift the person up. Why not just focus on the positives? So Jody, what do you do well? And if you question that, you got to tame that family in the head that's saying, oh, and I don't know Jody, of course, but we could just say, right? Maybe there's something in her family head that says, well, she didn't do anything well. That's not true. That's a bunch of baloney. Because I know that everybody can do something well. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't. Nobody makes every jump shot. Nobody makes every field goal. I got analogies all day, Dr. Anna, but I'm not going to do it. But that's really of where I think we focus on. And with individuals with BPD, I'm a very positive person. I don't know, I'm just kind of built that way. But I always try to identify their strengths and their positives. We don't negate the negatives, right? We know they're there. But what can you do to manage it? Because man, does that make people feel powerful, able, and then they're efficacious in their relationships and with themselves.
Beautiful. I'm going to combine two questions. One is very simple. Where are you located? And that is from Mason. Thank you, Mason. And the other one is, do you offer any online or remote classes or courses that people can take? And that's from Carl.
Okay. I'm in Houston, Texas, and I do have an online BPD course that I created with my publisher, New Harbinger. I also have a YouTube channel. So I put out videos every week. And sometimes we'll talk about like narcissistic personality disorder or whatnot, but the majority of it is based on BPD and different factors, issues, traits, and symptoms. So we talk about that on there. So I'm kind of everywhere, I'm everywhere.
Well, it's great that you have a program online because, to me that seems like it is at least an entry point for for people to get a chance to understand, where can they go, what can they do to address some of these things. And then there's the book, which, I'm a big fan of bibliotherapy, read, learn, educate yourself, think about these issues, figure out what the tools are. The book is really, really user friendly, I have to say. So yes, I think that's a pretty good starting point. Here's another one. This is from Dave. So what is the main flag that we may have? I am very emotional. And this is from Dave. Thank you, Dave. I really actually like that question because I always think of dysregulation and splitting when I think of BPD. Oh, I cannot hear you. I cannot hear you. Just keep talking. Keep talking because it'll plug in. Keep talking.
Well, I can keep talking.
Okay, now I can hear you. Keep talking.
Good. Yeah, because I can keep. Dr. Anna, you don't want to say keep talking because I will keep on talking. So, okay. So I think what are some of the flags? Like, what are some of the indicators of BPD? Is that kind of question? So I think, interesting. You brought up a really good point, which was splitting. Actually, splitting is seen in every mental illness, because what we see is that even if you look at like severe major depressive disorder, so what happens is that they end up with a very extreme and negative view, right? So it's a split. And then with narcissistic personality disorder, either you're great or you're stupid. And that is narcissistic. So we see that splitting across many different personality disorders or mental health issues. But I think as what are some of the flags? I think that's tricky because I think that we're talking about surface behaviors, like specific surface behaviors. What I would say is when you see particular behaviors, ask yourself, what's driving this? What kicked it off? Which is, was it something that you said or was it not something you said? And then notice the intensity sometimes of response, because a lot of individuals with BPD, they feel as though this BPD or this abandonment fear, rejection sensitivity, emptiness takes over. So the response tends to be intensive. And there's a lot of different individuals who respond in very intensive ways for a whole host of reasons. So that's why we got to take a step back and say, what kind of kicked this off? And that's why, and here's another one of my sayings, Dr. Anna, here it comes, is that we got to strike when the iron's cold, which means that if somebody is spiraling, right, and they're stuck on that carousel, that isn't a great time to ask them, hey, did this come from your childhood as they're circling around? No, wait till they're off the carousel and just say, hey, can I ask you about ABC? And then you can process it. Because what happens is that when we all, and this is human beings, this is how it works. When we get activated, our view and the information we can take in becomes very provincial. So we miss a lot of components, hence why we split when we're activated. So when we're calm, we hear more alternatives. We hear more options. That's why it's so important to manage clients in session so that they can remain calm, feel safe, and we can process those issues. So I know that that's a long question, but it's a complex question. Complex.
Yeah, well, I mean, and I think this is where, we're just kind of scratching the surface, really. I mean, it's a great conversation, it's a good starting point, and it covers the book content, but I think it really opens up the reality that, I think there are layers to this issue. Some people will be candidates as they can get the diagnosis. But others may just have features that continuously cause trouble in life. And so I think the book is actually very useful for people who just know that sometimes there are things they have tenderness around their relationships and things can go wrong quickly or they take things personally. Here's a really good one from Anne. I'm afraid that my husband will leave me over the littlest thing that happened in our relationship. Am I a candidate for BPD?
So that sounds like an abandonment fear issue. And I would say that talking with a trained mental health provider, I mean, there are evaluations and consultations and things that and can do to try to determine that. But exactly as you mentioned, Dr. Anna, that it's very rare for individuals to meet criteria for a full personality disorder.
Mhm.
More likely, and this is true of actually every mental illness, we're more likely to hit the unspecified, whether it's personality disorder with borderline traits or unspecified depressive disorder, anxiety disorder, whatever, because, and to go back to BPD, because of those 5 of the 9 that you need, and I love it, because what that tells us is that there are individuals out there that are struggling with a lot of traits, and then they may go to a mental health provider who's only focused on what I call the upper 3%, and that's where the stigma is that they think that BPD is always Glenn Close from Fatal Attraction or Gone Girl or something like that, and that just isn't the case, because BPD, like all disorders, are on a normal curve, which means most individuals are in the moderate range. Most of my clients are in the moderate range. I have a few that are high moderate, severe, no extreme BPD at the moment, but But in working with that, and so we have to be able to identify it. So I think the fact that Anne is asking that question is a great one. I will also throw out, please be careful with taking free stuff online. Please don't do that. Please find a qualified licensed mental health provider who understands personality disorders, since that was Anne's question. Please don't take that stuff online. Please, and don't ask Claude or Gemini or ChatGPT if you have it. Hopefully they have now added, I think Claude actually has said in there, if you're wondering about this question, you should seek a qualified mental health provider. And that's really the best way to know, because, and don't be afraid if you find it out, because if you find it out, remember that this is a manageable and treatable disorder. Even if the aspect was just an abandonment fear, and I don't mean just as if I'm minimizing, I'm just saying, we don't know about the other factors. I mean, but you can work on how that manifests. You can work on that fear and how that fear manifests with your husband. And both of you can get greater understanding. I mean, and it is one of the exact reasons why I developed this book, because I don't know where Anne is, and my caseload is full, but this is an extension of the work I do with my clients or with partners and couples who have BPD in their relationships, and it helps them work through it, identifying these issues and those problem areas and building intimacy and building connection, and not letting those old maladaptive beliefs, behaviors, and patterns impact the relationship you're in today.
We don't want to blow up our relationships, and this is why I want to end with these two things. One is recognizing that there are healthy ways of being in relationship. And if you notice that you're blowing up your relationship, and this really comes from chapter 3, and I love this chapter because it talks about what makes a good relationship. 5 components: open communication, listening and feeling heard, talking openly about emotions and physical desires, trusting yourself and the other person, and working through disagreements, which frankly is a superpower. So you got to build that skill. And then you go on and you identify 8 steps to follow to really be able to do well with heated exchanges. So maybe you can, just as we close up, because we've got a minute left, and thank you everyone for your messages and sharing with us today, and for sure for Dr. Daniel Fox and his wonderful BPD workbook. What would you suggest that would benefit our listeners today as we wrap up?
One place to start is think about your relationships and where you are within that relationship and what you want from it, but also what can you do to connect to your partner in a more direct and clear way. I think, so many times, and I'll be brief because I know we're ending in a moment, but like the love languages, which I absolutely love. I love the love language. But a lot of times they look at it as, oh, this is my love language. When I look at it, I look at, well, here's my partner's love language, and that tells me and helps me communicate with her. And she does, now she's a psychologist, but my wife. But we use it to communicate with one another, not this is how you understand me. Let's work towards calm and connection, not it's my partner's job to connect to me. I mean, I want to connect to her and she wants to connect with me. And that's kind of where we meet in the middle. And I'll tell you, we've had good times, bad times, we've been broke, we've had it all. And we
Sounds
still,
like a normal relationship.
yeah, it is. For sure it is.
Exactly.
Yep. And we love each other and respect each other. And sometimes it gets messy, where you get frustrated, but that doesn't mean it's over. And just, why we're in it and who you're with and who you want to spend your time with on the planet.
This was an absolutely delightful show. I hope we'll have you on again at some time in the
I hope so.
future to talk about this really important conversation. Wishing you all a gentle day. Take care of yourself and recognize even the best relationships have moments where you have to work through stuff. So, make it honest and have a gentle day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Bear Psychology Radio Show with your host, Dr. Anna Baranowsky, right here on Reality Radio 101.